All right, we are up to lesson 8 now. Again, no new lesson notes, so we'll go right into the examples. So, a spinner is divided into three equal sections, A, B, and C. Based on probability, how many times would you expect the spinner to land on C after spinning it 30 times? So the key in this case is that each section is equal three times. So there's a 1/3 chance of landing on a 1/3 chance landing on B, 1/3 chance landing on C. So that would mean about 1/3 of the time I would expect the spinner to land on C. So in this case, if I spin it 30 times, what is 1/3 of 30? Well, 1/3 of 30 is 10. So based on probability, I would expect the spinner to land on C about 10 times. Now, can it land on C more than 10 or less than 10? Of course it can, but I would expect that it would be around 10. Maybe it's 11 or 12 or 8 or 9, but it should be close to 10. Okay? Number 2, after spinning the spinner 30 times, the frequency of the outcomes is A, 9 times, B, 8 times, C, 13 times. Is the number of times the spinner landed on C reasonable based on your expectations? So it landed on C 13 out of 30 times. So that's a little bit more than a third of the time, but does 13 seem reasonable? And I would say yes, it does. Why would I say it's reasonable? Well, because 13 is pretty close to 10. Now, if it landed on C, say 25 out of 30 times instead of 13, 25 out of 30, I would say would be very unreasonable based on my expectations. So number 2, I just answered verbally. All right, is the number of times the spinner landed on C reasonable based on your expectations? I would say yes, it is, because 13 is close enough to 10. Like I said, 25 out of 30 times might be considered a little more unreasonable. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, the spinner is spun 3,000 times. Give an example of a number of spins that result in C that would be possible but unusual. Explain your reasoning. So if I spun it 3,000 times, a third of 3,000 would be 1,000, right? So a third of 3,000 would be 1,000. So I would expect it to land on C about 1,000 times. Now, like I said before, instead of 25 out of 30, let's say it landed on C 2,500 times. Is it possible that it could land on C 2,500 out of 3,000 times? Yes, it's possible. But would that be very unusual? Would that be very likely to happen? Probably not. So give an example of a number of spins that result in C that would be possible but unusual. So 2,500 would be possible but unusual. And on the low end, say 200. If it only landed on C 200 out of 3,000 times, I would think that's pretty unusually low. Okay, so this is an example of a high number and a low number of times that would be possible. It's technically possible, but would be considered highly unusual based on our expectations of it landing on C about a third of the time. All right, so that is it for the examples, and that is it for this lesson.